Chinese beggar gangs are exporting their beggars all over the world. If you've been keeping up with the news, you would have heard about this quite bizarre sort of situation where the Australian police have actually arrested 7 professional beggars, in Australia, and they're actually part of a begging gang. I've covered begging gangs before on this channel, and in China, begging is a big organization. It's a big sort of a mafia-run thing, and it's fairly despicable the way that they hire children, kidnap children and things like that. But it's also quite a profitable business for middle-aged people to do in their spare time. So let's talk a little bit about this and the absolute absurdity of the fact that China is putting people on planes with tourist visas to go overseas and beg in foreign countries. Beggars in China are relentless and underhanded. You have to understand that most people know the game. They don't give money to beggars in China, so they resort to all these really dastardly tactics. I'll give you a few. I remember very clearly sitting down having a date at a nice park with a girlfriend of mine, and we sit down and we're sitting kind of cuddling on a bench, and that's when the beggars come, because they know the last thing that a couple who's kind of getting friendly wants is a dirty, filthy beggar bothering them. So that's when they come. So they come and they start to, put their filthy bowl in your face. And so you want to pay them just to go away, obviously. But that's a bad mistake, because then they all start swarming. I swear, we just eventually left the park because it was just relentless beggars, one after the other. Another thing they like to do is they like to get up in your face. You're sitting in a restaurant, and look, anyone who's been living in China for any period of time or visited China has probably had this happen. You're in a restaurant or at an outdoor barbecue, and they come to you while you're eating. They love to disturb people while they're eating. Again, filthy bowl, touching you with their filthy clothes and their, I'm sorry to use the word filthy, but it's part of their tactic is they're very unclean, because they know that you'll pay them to not touch you. Because that's what they do. They've got no qualms about coming up and actually grabbing you or touching you with their filthy clothes and bowl, because they know that you're just going to get rid of them and give them money to go away. If they're children, they will actually cling to you like the flower girls. I made a video about that a while ago. They'll actually cling to you and hold on your leg like a koala and not let go until you buy their little cheap rose from them, their fake rose, and give them a lot of money to go away. And that brings me to the next part. Beggars in China are part of organized crime. It's a gang thing. They kidnap children. They mutilate children in order to get more sympathy. This is not some hearsay nonsense. This is the truth. They do kidnap children, and they purposefully break their limbs, burn them, disfigure them, do all sorts of terrible things, so that on the street, people will see this disfigured child and feel sympathy and give money. I know this happens in other countries such as India and things like that, but I'm just talking about from what I've seen with my own eyes living in China for so long. They also do things like hire disabled people. So they'll go to a family that has a mentally disabled child, or even a grown-up, and they'll hire them so that they can cart them around in public wherever there's a begging hotspot, and people will take pity on this poor mentally handicapped person. Or they'll even hire people with physical disabilities who've been born with a growth or something. They go after people that are going to gain more sympathy, and then they cart them around. So you're talking about a really kind of disgusting ethos of business over here. They go after the weak, they prey on the weak, they prey on the disadvantaged, they kidnap children, or they just hire them or rent them. They drug children. I stopped this whole thing on the Shenzhen metro where they were drugging a child and passing it around to different women who would then strap the same child on their back, which was always knocked out on drugs, obviously, and just go up and down with a collection bowl, in filthy clothes and being like, hey, help us out. So they do all these kind of things, and that's why I'm very much against the beggar gangs of China. It's not that I care about homeless people. I'm not one of those guys who's like, hey, go get a job or something like that. I understand people go through rough times in their lives, and sometimes you have to rely on the charity of others. There's just no other way. I know, I've been in that situation myself. The difference is the children and the vulnerable people that are put at risk here, all to make money in a dastardly, underhanded way. So now these people are expanding, and have been for some time, to your country. You see, these Chinese beggar gangs have been taking advantage of Chinese people for so long that everyone's kind of streetwise. If you're sitting at a table somewhere in a restaurant and a beggar goes around, you will notice that almost nobody gives them any money. And it's usually the owner of the restaurant who runs out and puts a 1 RMB note or something in their bowl to shoo them away so that they don't disturb the customers. But the actual customers themselves will just push them away. They don't give a crap. And what they've realized is that Western nations are far more compassionate and are far more giving to charity, because you can look at that sort of international list of countries ranked by charitability, and you'll see that as far as charity goes, China's all the way down at the bottom. It's not a very charitable nation. So, how do they get their money on these sweet, sweet new markets of compassion and charitability? Simple. Let's fly our beggars out there. I mean, we've seen this before with the fake monks, which has been really successful. All around the US, Australia, Europe, you name it, you can find fake monks. I've done a video about the fake monks before, so if you're interested in that, go check it out. But they've done it with the fake monks. They've done it with the Chinese blessing scam, which is actually a very dastardly scam which targets other Chinese people living overseas, where they'll work in like a little gang, and what they'll do is they'll have somebody go and make friends with a local Chinese person that lives in, I don't know, San Francisco, Chinatown, or any kind of place where you find like a Chinese population. So they go make friends, and then they tell this random fortune teller all the personal details they've found out about the person. Then this fortune teller will just like magically walk past them on the street and go like, there's a curse on you. You better get, your valuables blessed, or there's going to be big misfortune, your children are going to die, or a ghost is going to come. And so they tell these guys to put all their valuables and money in a bag and bring it for a blessing ceremony. And then they do this, and while they're doing this, they sleight of hand switch it out with a bag full of junk. And then they tell them, all right, the blessing has been set, but you can't open the bag for another 2 days or the blessing will, become null and void. And so these guys go home and, 2 days later, they open up the bag and find out all their valuables and money are gone. And it's actually quite a common trick in America anyway, and a lot of people have been had for a lot of money. We've also seen the goods return scam. There was that guy who cost Apple, almost $1 million by bringing in fake iPhones from China, part of a little thing, and then returning them as faulty and getting good new ones in return, then sending them back to China to be sold. These guys are really good at finding loopholes and ways to make money and to cheat the system. So now they've realized that they can send their beggars over to your country in order to get your sympathy money. So what exactly happened in Australia? Well, some eagle-eyed citizens were walking around and seemed to notice the same beggars more or less in the same place, but noticed that they were wearing the same clothes. In other words, one day you'd see an old lady wearing this tattered jacket with patches sewn onto it to make them look more poor. And then the next day there'd be an old man wearing the same jacket, the exact same jacket, holding like badly translated English signs. And every time they started to try and film them, they'd quickly get up, pack away all their signs and stuff and walk away. And so people started to keep an eye on this, and they noticed that a well-dressed woman was dropping them off in a van in the day, and then, they get back in at night and they drive off. Turns out these people were staying in a nice suburban home. They've got a place to stay, they're being looked after, and it's all controlled by this beggar gang. These beggars were making up to 400 Australian dollars a day. This is an incredibly lucrative business. They also found out that they'd already taken a lot of the money that they'd earned and changed it into Chinese RMB to take back with them. So, here you actually have an incredibly scummy operation where so-called beggars, homeless people are being flown out all the way to Australia from China, just some random elderly people coming and sitting there for the day pretending to beg, earning a whole lot of money, changing it back into Chinese currency, and then presumably flying back and being replaced by new, fresh beggars every once in a while. Very well organized. Very, very well organized. It's scummy, but if you know China and you know the beggar gangs, you know that this is normal. Another thing you'll also know about China is that you won't find Chinese beggars abroad. If someone has enough money to fly overseas, Chinese person, it's because they're wealthy. Even if they're not wealthy, they have family and they have connections, and begging is a big loss of face for any Chinese person. So to find an actual Chinese beggar in a foreign country is incredibly rare, and I would actually say probably non-existent. Maybe you might find one or two in one of the very established Chinatowns around the world, but in general, you just don't find that. It is a business for them. I'd prefer if people wouldn't judge China as a whole too harshly on this particular topic, because this is just a very unscrupulous bunch of people. Anyone that's involved in the whole begging sort of scene in China is an absolute scumbag. I mean, I've run into these people a lot in the past. There's a lot of human trafficking involved, and there's a lot of taking advantage of vulnerable people. But if you do happen to see an elderly Chinese person begging on the street in your country, I can guarantee you 100% that they're not an actual, true, proper beggar. And if you support them, you're actually supporting these terrible human trafficking gangs. So do not give them any money, and in fact, report them to the police. If you don't report them to the police, at least take their photo and film them, because I'd love that footage from you. Let's put an end to these people. Anyway guys, thanks for watching. Every single Friday you can watch another SerpentZA. Wednesday, 1 p.m. EST, you've got Lao 86. And of course, most importantly, ADVChina. Every second week we've also got our podcast. And until then, you know the drill. As always, stay awesome.